Now, tenders, personal benefit and corruption. These are just some of the findings of the Moerane Commission Report into political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. Premier Willies Mchunu has released the report to the public. Let's cross live now to eNCA's Dasen Thathiah to find out more. Now, Dasen, I suppose the Commission has actually made it clear that they were not investigating what actually happened.
For you, I didn't get all of that from you, but I can tell you this is the report right here, 425 pages worth, and it was a highly anticipated report. It's been 2 years since that commission was established by the Premier, Willies Mchunu, and now 1 month shy of those 2 years, it's now been released to the public. You mentioned some of the findings. This report goes through all of the testimonies that were heard before those hearings over the year that those public hearings were held, and that's about 60 or so testimonies. And some of those findings initially talking about the role of councillors. Now, councillors seem to be central to some of the problems relating to political killings, and the reason for this is because those positions don't require any qualifications. Those positions are seen to be giving certain people access to tenders, to resources as well, and that's why it's highly contested. The issue of state agencies, security agencies at least, also coming into question. This commission talking about the strength of those agencies, saying they found that there are some weaknesses within crime intelligence in particular. Now, that is very, very significant, considering that crime intelligence is responsible for alerting a police, or at least being on top of things, especially when there is going to be one of these hits that are going to come up as well. So that's also very, very significant. Now, in terms of the recommendation here, and this is no surprise really, it talks about the fact that political parties now need to get together, the leadership of various political parties, and discuss these issues. Now, the Premier saying that he will ensure that happens soon. He's promised that all of these recommendations will be implemented. He wants to ensure that all political parties sit around a table, but also bringing in other organizations, civic organizations, religious organizations as well, and having them have a discussion. But more than that, the things that go beyond the mandate of the provincial government will then be referred to national government for implementation and consideration.
Dasen, did the Commission share any of their own thoughts, especially around both the councillors and crime intelligence, as to how they think or envisage these gaps can be closed? Did they make any suggestions about whether, for example, which were some of the things that came up during the hearings, that perhaps they should be a qualifications, or whether it's a matric qualification or something imposed to say you can't just be a councillor without a matric certificate, for example, or you must attend certain courses that will empower you. Did they give any of their own thoughts?
That was one of the things that was raised during the commission, and I remember it very distinctly. There was a professor from UKZN that had actually raised that. I think it was Paulus Zulu at the time, and he said distinctly that there needs to be qualifications for these positions, because it otherwise anyone is able to get into it, and it then leads to one person, in effect, put very simply, killing another person in the hopes of getting that position. So that is now something that is also going to be under review. The other issue, which is directly related to that of councillors, is the issue of tenders. So the Premier is saying that he wants to get Treasury involved here to relook at some of the measures that will be taken to ensure that the tender process can't be circumvented. Because you'll remember that during the commission, one of the things that came up, and it's here in the findings as well, is that there's an allegation that greed is driving political killings. Greed for this access to resources, greed in relation to tenders and also positions of power. And now that is something that they will have to look at. But Vuyo, although these recommendations will be implemented according to the Premier, I can tell you that it's still early days because there are so many discussions that need to be had, both at provincial level and at national level. So it really remains to be seen as to exactly when all of this will be implemented and when there will be some material difference on the ground and how quickly these changes will be adopted.
Before I let you go, Dasen, speaking of the Premier, he made a remark about the possibility of introducing a state of emergency. What was the context to that particular remark?
Well, that's over the state of political killings, because what he did mention specifically is that political killings are not exclusive to KwaZulu-Natal. Now, although it happens here and although the numbers are very high here, he says that this issue is something that is a national problem and is a national concern. And even the findings of this report and the recommendations could go far beyond KwaZulu-Natal and could be implemented elsewhere as well. He even told other political parties, which had commented after he tabled the report earlier, other political parties saying that this is an ANC problem. And he responded by saying, no, it's not an ANC problem. This is not exclusive to the ANC, and none of these recommendations apply only to that party. And said to them that although some parties had not experienced political killings per se, he says that none of them can say that there aren't any tensions, and tensions are generally the precursor to these killings that we've seen.